Coping with life. There have been so many difficult times. The horror and shock of witnessing this cruelty visited on my child has been permanently etched on every cell of my body. One night I dreamt about Brian. I thought that I was with him and he was well. I was crying and said to him, "Oh Brian, I had this horrible dream that you got really sick." I was rubbing his shiny soft hair with tears in my eyes, and he was giving me one of those looks that said, "What is she on about?" When I woke up, there were a couple of moments when the dark pain lifted, and I thought that his illness had been a nightmare and Brian was safe and well. I was so blissfully happy, just for a moment. Then reality flooded in, and I knew I had to live in the nightmare. In one way, it seemed a particular cruelty to bring us so close and then snatch Brian away. I had spent months with him, listening to every breath, helping every movement. I was in tune with every rhythm of his body, and there was just him and me for long stretches of time. When his dad and everyone else had work or school or whatever, I spent long, pain-filled nights with him and frightened, anxious days. Now there was nothing. I had gone from 24-hour Brian-filled days to nothing. His dad John wondered whether Brian could have orchestrated events in his own life. Brian undoubtedly had an understanding that his dad might find it difficult to be present on certain occasions. Had Brian managed to orchestrate the timing of his own birth in the Bon Secours Hospital so that his dad arrived 10 minutes after his birth? And again in the case of the timing of his death at home so that his dad arrived at his bedside minutes after he died? Smiling, John recalled incidents where Brian would stick solidly to his own point of view. Remembering the many matches he watched Brian play. Soccer for Wilton United and GAA for Bishopstown. Left-footed, as his dad had noticed from a young age. I remember walking back to work one lunch hour. I put my hand in my coat pocket and found a piece of paper. I automatically pulled it out to see what it was. "Have a good one, Manny," was written on it. The words hit me broadside and the tears just poured down my face. It was a card that I had found on flowers on Brian's grave with a note from the heart. This wish, "Have a good one, Manny," was our deepest desire for Brian in his new life. Shock and horror were very near the surface for all of us. And that's not to mention the sadness at our loss, which was a different issue. I missed him so much. It took years for me to be able to remember anything of who Brian was without disability. I have talked of his courage and bravery facing death as they have amazed me. But really, the thing that I remember most about Brian is how funny he was. I always say that he was my own Jim Carrey, the actor in Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. Brian was always pulling funny faces. He made funny noises and used his own made-up words, and he was an innocent, practical joker. The world is not the same without you, Brian. I'm not alone in missing him, of course. As a family, we don't talk much about how we feel. We show our feelings more by action than words. To have had a taste of the love and friendship a young adult can give, and then lose him before he has taken more than a few steps in his new life, it's so painful. Not alone have we lost Brian, we each have lost ourselves, lost who we were in a family of 6. We've had to reconfigure ourselves as a new entity, a family of 5. When the boys bought their dad a ticket to the Celtic and Rangers final in Glasgow for his birthday, we all went to the match. It carried extra meaning for us, as we were remembering that our Brian was buried in Colin Healy's shirt. The night before the match, Paul was, as he had been many nights, deeply distressed, and was out at Brian's grave at about 1:30 in the morning. Val and I went out and collected him, and he and I chatted for a couple of hours when he got home. "You know, I really wished I could have been Brian," he spluttered. "I was always stronger. I'd go for a header when we were playing soccer when he wouldn't. I wished it could have been me all that time. I wished that I had to suffer all the pain and not Brian. I was stronger. But now I'm glad it wasn't me who died and Brian left to grieve. The pain I have now, it's worse than anything Brian suffered. I'm glad that I'm suffering this, not Brian. I'm glad that I got the worst pain. I'm glad that it was Brian who died." I know there are no words that can adequately describe the intense pain that we all felt, but these words of Paul, they give a slight indication of its depth. John remembered his brother as always being the little pet, going for cuddles with me, long after the rest of them were too cool for that. He saw Brian as Dewey in the show on TV called Malcolm in the Middle. Dewey is the youngest boy in the show, not the main character. He's hopelessly out of his depth, staying out of the way of his older brother's daily fights and misadventures. Yet, somehow, Dewey always seems to find a way to come up trumps in the end. Usually, nobody else in the family even realises it. Smiling, John recalled one thing that ran through every aspect of Brian's character, what you might call an unusually logical way of looking at things. He often pointed out the obvious, what everyone else had failed to see. He recalled times when Brian's logic brought about the very best results. Brian's famous logic, he remembered, was well demonstrated on the Christmas that he and Paul had outgrown Santa, but Brian still believed. Several large gifts remained under the tree. These, of course, were Brian's presents from Santa. John looked on as Brian happily opened this extra set of presents. As he opened one of the gifts, Brian looked across the room at him with a knowing expression on his face. No words were spoken, and John says he'll never know for certain whether Brian's belief in Santa was a big act that year. One thing's for sure, however, when he looked at him, he knew he was getting more presents, and he knew that John knew it too. Logic. Kids that believe in Santa get more presents than those that don't. John wasn't with his brother when he died, but he spent the preceding hours with him. However, it's meant a lot to him that he stayed with Brian on his last night and helped him through it, holding his hand and telling him that he was doing great when he was gasping for breath. He forgot about his own pain and was there for Brian. Paul recalled all the fun they had in hospital when the crowd of young lads would have their laughs, and one would go across the road to Abracababra and bring back food, creating a party atmosphere. He also remembers a kind nurse who opened the door to the room one time to find him and Brian smoking a cigarette. She quietly closed it, saying nothing. Vicky remembered Brian's kindness, how he would sit down with her at homework time and give her a hand with her maths. He was good at maths, and he was good at explaining them too. His dad and I are glad that we were so close to Brian. At all times we believed him, and knowing him so well, we were convinced he wasn't the kind to imagine a pain. We made our own decision about visitors, allowing his friends to visit. Brian, without friends, would have been like a fish without water. We were his parents. Our job was to parent him, to provide him with survival tools. We considered his friends his best chance of psychological survival. Rather than limit the number of youngsters visiting as was suggested, we limited the relations. Taking care of a young adult, I soon realised that he didn't want visits from well-meaning neighbours or family. He wanted his buddies. I had the opportunity in his final months to really love Brian, unconditionally. The more disabled he was, the more I loved him, and my heart was breaking watching him struggle. This intense experience is forever etched in my body. It's part of who I am now. It's not the child I miss, it's my adult son, taller than me, enthusiastic about music, kind and funny. I miss his laughter. The final hymn at Brian's anniversary mass a year later spoke to our feelings. Wear my name upon your heart. Keep it safe while we're apart, till we meet in deepest peace somewhere again. I've had a little statue of the Pieta in my bedroom since I was a child. My sister Anne, who died some years before Brian died, had given it to me when I was small. To be honest, I don't know why she gave me this gripping masterpiece, depicting Jesus, dead in his mother's arms, but she did. However, it became abundantly clear to me that while this masterpiece is sculpted in marble, the reality Michelangelo captured was lived in flesh and blood, and for me, in real life. I remember the morning I lifted a lifeless child back to his bed with the nurse. Brian's heart had stopped. The pulse monitor bleeped that flat sound, but life gradually returned as Brian came back to us. We dodged the bullet that morning. I don't have words to adequately describe that reality. The nurse suggesting I call the priest and phone his dad, I felt sick with pain and fear. I used to faint at the sight of blood when I was a child, can you imagine? I didn't know that morning when I would hold Brian's dead body in my arms for real, just as Mary did in the Pieta. His dad also vividly remembers that morning in the hospital, his feelings of utter powerlessness, continually asking the nurse if she thought that Brian would feel through, feeling that if there's life, there's hope. He placed it in God's hands. This was the only way he could continue watching his little boy, white as a sheet, the life drained out of him. It's an experience he would not wish on anybody. I'm grateful I was given the chance to be with Brian. I'm glad I could help out. I was blessed that Brian allowed me to be love in his life, grateful that he was gracious enough to allow all of us to be with him without ever a complaint. It was a catastrophic change in Brian's life, from playing soccer and going to school one week to being terminally ill in a wheelchair weeks later. Yet he managed it. He managed it because he accepted it. He did the best he could with it. My sense of gratitude remains. When I hugged Brian's remaining clothes, I needed to retrieve every last molecule I could smell of my boy. I knew I had a lot to be grateful for. How many people yearning for the child they cannot have would gladly settle for 19 years? That longing has to be a worse ache. How many people whose children died suddenly or in accidents wish they could have been present when they passed away? How cruel is it for families where children die through suicide or addiction, or have long-term serious illnesses where parents feel helpless? I surely would choose my journey over any of theirs. This I know. I'm sorry if you have been on a journey more difficult than mine. Love was his gift to us. He told me to accept as he accepted. I felt he was telling me to stay with the overwhelming love, soak it in, live it, breathe it. I accept that Brian had somewhat of a cameo role. He was not present for all the episodes of my life, but look what he brought to our lives. He showed me how to live each day fully and without complaint. He showed how to play the game and not get bogged down. He wasn't interested in winning, just playing. The morning that Brian died was a calm and easy morning, from Brian's point of view. The doctor had called me out of Brian's room and said, "You do know that he's dying." I returned to Brian's room, and 10 minutes later all his energy was used, and Brian left us with no fuss or bother. Living and dying, he moved freely and simply. I'd practiced my goodbye over and over. God bless, protect, guard and guide. I love you forever, I love you forever. I kept telling myself, you can do it, you can do it. You can't let him down. You can smile, and you can do it, and I did. Despite the overwhelming pain we felt, there was a deep feeling of satisfaction, of relief, of getting it right for Brian. It was love that turned the horror of his funeral into a beautiful reflection of the life of Brian. The love of his family, relatives, friends and neighbours, of work colleagues from my office and John's, of his classmates, and of John, Paul and Vicky's classmates. It was like a blanket that enfolded us and kept us safe. This is the real presence. This is God in our lives, strong and alive in our community. At Christmas time we always get a hamper from the lads, never forgotten, always cherished by them, and we in turn are very moved and comforted by their constancy. A blessing on each of them. I know I repeat myself when I say that young people today are wonderful, but it's worth repeating, as our world is safe in their hands. We will always be drawn to remembering Brian and wanting to be with him again. A photo plate on his headstone has Brian smiling at us, and we've written, "It broke our hearts to lose you, but you did not go alone, for part of us went with you the day God called you home." It's consoling for me that this photo plate is often warm to the touch. It faces southwest, so the sun warms it, making it easier to kiss the marble face that looks out at me. When Hickey's Headstones erected the headstone we ordered for the grave, the little wooden cross put up temporarily to mark Brian's burial spot was no longer needed. So I brought it home. On it's a plaque which reads, Brian O'Mahony, 28th of June, 2001. Rest in peace. We nestled his cross behind the arch against the back wall of our back garden. We have a 3-foot figurine of a boy right next to it. It's set in a very private spot, with the evergreen gold Brian plant growing right alongside it. I hadn't realised before this that there even was a plant called Gold Brian. A further plaque that I came across, which means so much to me, peeps out respectfully from behind the figurine and reads, "If the dead can come back to this earth and flit unseen around those they loved, I shall always be near you. In the gladdest days and darkest nights, always, always. And if there be a soft breeze upon your cheek, it shall be my breath. As the cool air fans your throbbing temple, it shall be my spirit." The whole scene is complemented by a wisteria which is about 5 feet high, And in spring and early summer, its beautifully scented flowers drape majestically down over the cross, the other plaque and the figurine. It creates a beautiful setting, especially when the wisteria is in full flower and the scene below is enveloped in its purple cloak. Our little private spot ensures that we'll never forget that Brian is part of us, that we are not leaving him behind. Rather, he's part of every barbecue, and he cheers at every score his nieces and nephews accomplish when they're kicking about. In the meantime, life has moved on for all of us. My mum and John's have gone to their reward. The year after Brian died, Catherine was diagnosed with a brain tumour. We walked together 5 evenings a week. Catherine, taller and stronger than me, set the pace. In her final days, she was so weak that she held my arm while we took a little exercise up and down her hallway. She died all too soon, 5 years after Brian. I was with my brother Tony and his girls when Marion, my kind and caring sister-in-law, died of cancer. She is very much missed by all who were blessed in knowing her. Maureen, who printed out Brian's funeral readings, also died of cancer. She'd gone on holiday sometime after Brian's death and arrived home to me with a postcard of the Pieta, saying it reminded her of our last morning with Brian, her downstairs asking if she could help while Brian was dying in my arms. She called in to me a few days after Christmas in 2012, saying she'd been diagnosed with cancer and telling me she had less time than Brian. 9 weeks later, she was laid out in her home next door. There was not much time to come to terms with her passing. Joy is present in all our lives. My son Paul is now a social worker. He married Valerie, his childhood sweetheart, and they have 3 beautiful children. They named their eldest boy Brian, and he's a ball boy at the Cork City matches. Colin Healy, who gave his championship jersey to my Brian, is now playing for Cork City. I like this little coincidence. Vicky's getting on with her life, though she has yet to meet the man of her dreams. Our son John is a manager for HSE. He married Sinead, a girl from Brian's class in school. And the birth of the second of their 3 beautiful children, Liam Joseph, was the most wonderful gift on my 60th birthday. You see, I always feel quite emotional on my birthday, as I was told Brian was going to die on that day. Holy Thursday is another day when I feel acutely aware of the pain of life because Brian had such a bad night on Holy Thursday. My 60th birthday fell on Holy Thursday, so both occasions came together. Everything changed. My sadness was completely superseded by the joy of birth, as my precious 5th grandchild Liam was born on that day. When I collected balloons to bring to visit my new grandson, the shopkeeper suggested we put them in a black garbage bag so the strings would not get tangled in transport. On this occasion, the black bag did not symbolise my son being removed from the house, but rather celebration. Liam Joseph was christened on June 28th, the 14th anniversary of Brian's death. Joseph was Brian's second name. This is the circle of life. I'm so very grateful for all that I have been given. It's true that some people have a shorter lifespan than others, but they leave sweet memories to cherish. Love you, Brian.